Uh, Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum to everybody. I would like to welcome you all to this session. We'll have a 1 hour session on digestive problems in Ramadan fasting. I would like to welcome all of you once again. And a special welcome to a very good friend of mine, Dr. Karim Sharif, who is a consultant gastroenterologist in King Abdullah Medical City in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. He's kindly joined us, and I'm sure his expertise will also be useful for us as we go on. Welcome, Karim.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you very much.
The session is going to be more of a discussion. I will present a few slides with some information, and then Ms. Ruba, who's our senior clinical dietitian, will also share her views. And then we'll have hopefully half an hour at least of a fruitful discussion with all of you. Okay, without too much delay, let me start. We'll be talking about digestive problems, common digestive problems, I must say, in Ramadan fasting. Okay, next slide, please. Can you change the slide, please? Yes, as we all know, there are nearly 2 billion Muslims in the world, and it's estimated that well over 1 billion, and I think it is much more than that, fast during the holy month of Ramadan. Fasting in Ramadan means that for the entire month, for 29 or 30 days, Muslims do not eat or drink from pre-dawn to sunset. There is an early morning pre-dawn meal called the suhoor and a post-sunset breaking of the fast, which is iftar, during which there's no food or water intake whatsoever. There are, of course, other restrictions during this period, but we will not discuss that today. The main thing to remember is that there is altered meal times, and the sleep times are also changed due to prayers and fasting. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah, doctor, I changed it.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Why do Muslims fast? Fasting is an essential pillar of Islam. It's one of the 5 pillars, and Muslims believe that fasting, prayers, and remembrance of Allah gets us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also it's a period of reflection, discipline, improving oneself, and a good opportunity to understand hunger and empathize with those who are less fortunate. Of course, there are other health benefits too, and social benefits. It's a period where there is more neighborhood meetings in the neighborhood, exchanging of gifts, and of course, it's also a period of time when people tend to give a lot more in charity. Next slide, please. But the main reason why fasting is done in Ramadan is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kutiba alaykum siyam kama kutiba alal lazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed to those before you, that you may learn self-restraint. So this is the main reason why we fast. So, next slide, please. Who should fast? It is incumbent upon every adult Muslim to fast. Of course, very young children do not fast. Those with illness do not need to fast. Menstruating women, pregnant women, and nursing women are also not expected to fast. And so are travelers, if traveling makes it difficult for them to fast. Next slide, please. So how do you prepare for the fasting in Ramadan? Of course, in anybody who's healthy, mashallah, then fasting should not pose any problems at all. So it's a compulsory duty for Muslims, and they're expected to fast. In those who have health problems, they may be exempted from fasting. But as we have seen, I've seen this in many countries, in the UK, in India, and of course in this part of the world, most Muslims, the motivation to fast is far greater than any potential effects on health. So despite medical advice not to fast, people do indeed keep the fast, and therefore we need to support them in the decision with the best possible professional advice. So if not anything else, please remember that it is essential to discuss with your doctor well before Ramadan starts as to what is the best that you could do to optimize the fast and do it safely. Yes, of course, there are different types of illnesses. We have to think about acute illnesses, chronic illnesses. By chronic, I mean long-term illnesses. And we will discuss this in a little bit more detail as we go along. Next slide, please. So before we talk about diseases, I thought it would be useful to just touch briefly on what foods and digestion, the process of digestion is, so we understand. So food in various forms, and of course water that we eat and drink normally, is important source of calories, and it gives us essential nutrients for growth, for energy, and for various bodily functions. A human being cannot survive without food and water, as you know. There are numerous types of foods available as a niyama from Allah Ta'ala, and in different parts of the world, people have different diets, different cuisines, and the availability of food varies so much across the world. And of course, our eating behavior is also different. If you compare people in different countries, eating behaviors are very, very different. So all this, it becomes a cultural milieu in which we grow up and we develop habits as children, and that stays with us as we go into adulthood and go through our life. So the process of digestion is very complex. In fact, the digestive process is set to start even before you start eating. The thought of food, the sight of food, triggers neurons in our brains that prepares the stomach and the digestive system to receive food. And of course, when you eat food, and it takes maybe 20 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour for us to eat our foods. And then the process of digestion takes several hours after that, where the food is processed, it's broken down, it's absorbed, and it's used for energy expenditure. And of course, any excess food that we use, that we eat, is stored up for later use. Now, I'm not going to go into details about what happens inside the digestive system, because that's not relevant to the talk today. But what we need to understand is there's a little bit of difference in intentional fasting, which is intermittent, and planned, and starvation. Starvation is where there is no food available for us to eat. So the psychology of these two conditions is going to be different as well. Next slide, please. So the general principle about fasting and illness is that if the fast worsens the illness, or it prevents or delays recovery from the illness, then fasting is not advisable. I hope that's a very simple statement. So if it worsens the illness or delays or prevents recovery, then it's not advisable. If you still decide to fast, then you have many things to consider: what to eat, what not to eat during suhoor and iftar, and how to manage the food and fluid intake in the shorter period between Maghrib and early morning. So how to take the medicines at what times? These are important questions, because if we don't manage this properly, we can run into trouble. What about physical activity? How much exercise can I do? Can I go to work? And if I'm working outside, what do I do? How much rest can I take in the daytime? And how do I sleep in the shortened time in the night because of extra prayers? These are all questions that need to be planned and discussed. Next paragraph, next slide, please. So if we try and understand this on a population level, what are the common problems that we encounter in Ramadan? Of course, one of the main problems is dehydration, as we are not allowed to eat, or not just eat, but we're not allowed to drink any fluids during the daytime. And these hours of fasting can be anywhere from 12 to 16, even 18 hours in some parts of the world. As a result, people get tired, there's lack of energy. Sometimes the blood sugars can go down, or in diabetics, the blood sugars can actually go high and lead to diabetic complications. In terms of stomach-related issues or digestive problems, acidity, gassiness, acid reflux, bloating, upper abdominal discomfort, belching, constipation, all these are problems that are there with a significant number of people throughout the year or during different times of the year, but get exacerbated when we are fasting in Ramadan. And we'll talk about this again. The other problem that we notice in Ramadan is that the compliance with medicines is much less. So non-compliance with medicines is higher. People forget to take the medicines at the right time, and then when they're fasting, they are not able to take them. So it can lead to problems. There's also disruption in the sleep pattern. As a result, people can lose out on getting enough sleep on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So I have put up a list of digestive problems, which are gastrointestinal problems here, and I will just go through each one of them in brief, because it's not possible to have a comprehensive lecture on different digestive problems. So the first one on the list is GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease. In simple terms, it refers to acid or stomach contents that can rise up into the chest because of bloating in the stomach. Okay, and gastritis is a consequence of acidity or infections or some other insult to the stomach that causes inflammation in the stomach. So these are two common problems, GERD, which is called GERD, and gastritis. Of course, diarrheal diseases can also occur. People who have chronic diarrhea, they can find it more difficult because of recurrent diarrhea and dehydration, but also what we also see is that in the evenings, people do tend to eat a variety of foods, and there are stalls in neighborhoods where, unfortunately, sometimes episodes of food poisoning can happen and diarrheal disease can be seen. Peptic ulcers is not so common nowadays, but yes, there is a higher risk of worsening of peptic ulcers or new peptic ulcers in people when we are fasting. Then the other category that we need to look at is obesity and fatty liver disease or other chronic liver disease, people with irritable bowel syndrome or people with inflammatory bowel disease. I'm highlighting these issues because if we know that we have these conditions, then it is very, very important for you to have a chat individually, one-to-one with your doctor before you start fasting, because there can be unexpected flare-ups of these conditions, which causes discomfort, which causes anxiety, which causes distress, and sometimes can lead to the fast being broken due to vomiting or illness. Next paragraph. Next slide, please. To continue a little bit more, gallstones are a common problem in the world. You know, a lot of people tend to develop gallstones during their lifetimes, especially in women more than men. But there is data to suggest that problems related to gallstones are more frequent, leading to more admissions in Ramadan due to the fast. There was a paper from Turkey a couple of years ago that reported that there was almost a 20% jump in problems related to gallstones during Ramadan. It causes cholangitis, which is infection or inflammation in the biliary tree or the bile tubes, bile ducts, cholecystitis, which is inflammation of the gallbladder, and of course pancreatitis, which can be a very debilitating condition in some people. If you remember the first slide where we said if the illness is likely to, if the fasting is likely to make illness worse, then it's advisable not to fast. And I think this is certainly important in patients who have had recent surgery or any abdominal emergencies like GI bleeding, infections, or any surgical emergencies. Patients who are on long-term medications, especially those who are taking strong medications like steroids or immunosuppressant medicines, it is strongly advised not to fast or if you do decide to fast, only under very close medical supervision. I'll be very happy to answer questions related to any of these conditions in more detail, but I don't want to spend too much time going into the details of these different conditions at this point in time. Next slide, please. Except to mention one condition that we see nowadays all over the world, which is fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease is where there is excess fat deposition in the liver. That's all it means. Unfortunately, 1 in 3 people in UAE are thought to have fatty liver disease. It is associated with metabolic syndrome, which is a combination or has features of diabetes, central obesity, high blood pressure, or cholesterol problems. Fatty liver disease not only increases the risk of liver cirrhosis, which is liver failure, but it also leads to higher risk of cardiovascular or cerebrovascular disease and death, which is heart attacks and strokes, unfortunately. So this is a worldwide problem. This is increasing over the last 20, 30 years, and we need to be very aware of this condition. This in itself is not a contraindication to fasting, but I put this up to say that, nowadays, next slide, please. People use fasting as a means to losing weight, but this can certainly help. But a month of fasting in Ramadan is done for many different reasons, for spiritual reasons mainly, but it will have some health benefits for those who fast. In a study done by 2 different teams, we can see that when they have observed people who fast in Ramadan, when they're obese, just the act of fasting during the daytime helps to reduce bad cholesterol, it reduces blood pressure, it reduces blood sugar, and there was an average of 3.5 kg weight loss during this period. So this gives us a clue to what intermittent fasting can do, and this is actually being used by a lot of people for managing their excess weights. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I will make some brief statements which I have made. I think I've said this before. See your doctor well before the start of Ramadan and make a plan. Shared decision making tailored to you as an individual will make fasting safe in Ramadan, and it will be, inshallah, be more rewarding. And it is also important that after Maghrib until you go to bed, there is enough time for you to drink adequate fluids. A human body needs at least 2 liters of fluids in a 24-hour period. While it's easy to do this in other days, in Ramadan, you still have to try and drink as much as possible in the night time. And also eat a well-balanced and healthy diet, both at the suhoor time and iftar time, and try to spread out the evening meals as much as possible. It is very tempting to overeat, eat whatever is available quickly after Maghrib. So this needs to be avoided. And it's also important to avoid fatty and fried foods, spicy foods, and sweets. Sweets are foods with high glycemic index, because this can lead to more health-related problems. Of course, culturally, I understand that these are the sort of foods that we tend to enjoy together as a family or with neighbors, but we need to try and minimize this as much as possible. Get some good sleep, at least for a few hours at night, and try and get some rest during the daytime, because the working hours are also reduced and the school hours are reduced. We should try and get some rest during the daytime. Light exercises should be fine, even in Ramadan when you're fasting, but do make sure that the climate outside is okay, or do something light at home. And last but not the least, be careful about rapid weight gain after Ramadan. So it's very tempting again after Eid, during Eid and afterwards, to overdo and overcompensate and start gaining weight. Hopefully that shouldn't happen. Next slide, please. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but we will wait for Ms. Ruba to give her presentation, and then we will take questions together, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. It was a wonderful presentation. So without any delay, let's welcome Miss Ruba. Miss Ruba?
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
I'll just share my slides.
Yes, Doctor. Yes.
Is it
Yes.
audible?
Yes, we can see the slide.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you again, and thank you for being here today to join this pleasant talk about the holy month of Ramadan and its nutritional benefits to our soul and to our body. So I'll be covering all the facts and benefits for the fasting to our body and the impact of the fasting on weight, actually, and how to deal with if anyone is suffering from any kind of chronic disease, while how to manage during Ramadan, and how to make or incorporate our fasting into fruitful nutritional benefit, or how to do it in a better way, let's say. As we know, fasting during Ramadan, it's also known to have positive effects on the health, and it cleans our body and actually removes all the toxins from the body. It is very beneficial to understand that when we fast, the body does not have its usual access to the glucose, forcing the cells to to resort to another means of materials to produce energy. As a result, the body begins a process called glucogenesis, a natural process for producing its own sugar. So the liver helps by converting the non-carbohydrate materials like lactate, amino acids, and fats into the glucose of energy. And because our body conserves the energy during fasting, our basal metabolic rate becomes more efficient and lower our heart rate and blood pressure. So it is very important to fast in a healthy way and understand the concept behind that. Some of the benefits for fasting to our bodies, it's actually boosts the brain function. It protects our body from gaining more weight, and maybe improve our status of any chronic disease. It reduces inflammation and improves overall fitness. It aids somehow in weight loss, and this should be under supervision, of course, and it decreases the risk of metabolic diseases. And some studies showed that there is some benefits to cancer patients, and it can also help with maintaining better blood sugar in general, and it reduces insulin resistance. So theoretically, abstaining from all the certain foods and beverages, it should decrease the overall caloric intake, which will lead to weight loss overall if it is done in the proper way. Some research also has found that the short-term fasting may increase or boost the metabolism by increasing the levels of neurotransmitter, and which could enhance the weight loss in general. So how to incorporate that into a healthy way, and how to actually improve our health and benefit from fasting. Focusing on having a healthier iftar is the main goal, plus making suhoor wholesome. So focusing on the type of the food and the meals itself and the way we are preparing the food itself is very important. How are we dividing our caloric intake and recommendation, and the portion sizes itself, how we are taking it and when, it's very important. And it's very important to understand that this has a big impact on our bodies and our health in general, or also highlighting the digestive system itself. especially for people who are suffering from some acidity problems, or as we know, like people also tend to have or suffer from constipation more often during Ramadan, during the lack of consistent hydration, or let's say they are preserving the amount of food, specifically the fiber they are taking. So this will lead to constipation. So they have to make sure that the value of the meal itself on iftar and on suhoor, it has a very high nutrient content, not only focusing on the caloric wise. So it has to have a value. It has to have some fiber, some minerals, vitamins. So it should be colorful. Of course, that on the side of being hydrated means meeting the recommended intake of fluids in general, which is 1/3 of the body weight for each person is different. This focusing majority on the water consumption and low in sugar beverages. It could be coconut water, decaffeinated beverages, herbal teas, for example, and low in sugar juices. And to exercise moderately, this will be helping the digestive system to function in a better way, prevent constipation, and keeping in mind that exercise timing is very important to avoid any collapses. Specifically for those with chronic diseases, they should consult their physician first, and they should limit the exercise to light exercises, preferably after eating or after iftar. And those who are healthy adults capable to do or also used to exercising before, they can either exercise before the meal, not more than before the iftar, not more than 1 hour, or they can just preferably exercise 2 hours after the iftar or after breaking their fast. And people actually, they should make this as a base and take this opportunity to pick up healthy habits that can stay with them after even Ramadan. So, for example, taking or covering their needs, the proper caloric intake without overeating or exceeding the amount that they should be taking. Another is, for example, incorporate healthier cooking methods. Instead of using oil or fried food consumption, they can just use a healthier cooking method. And for example, incorporating more fiber or more fruits and vegetables to their daily meals. Talking about the chronic diseases, the first point, as Dr. Syed has discussed, that anyone with any specific condition, after taking or consulting their regular physician, if it's okay to fast, then they can do it under only supervision. But some or certain categories, they are preferably or advised to not to fast. Majority of the patients with ongoing chronic diseases and on treatment or medications, they should not force themselves only if their condition is stable. So for instance, like for example, the cardiac disease patients with serious heart conditions, after speaking to their doctor before Ramadan, particularly if they have symptoms that include, for example, chest pain, dizziness, fainting, or somehow shortness of breath, other risky condition, including heart failure, a patient who has undergone also open heart surgery or any recent surgeries, they should also they are not advised to fast. And diabetic patients, specifically type 1, or patients on insulin, getting treated with insulin, pediatrics as well, and with diabetic patients with uncontrolled high blood sugar or with other chronic diseases, they are not also advised to fast. Otherwise, it should be if they are diabetic, but somehow their blood sugar is controlled, it should be under monitoring of the treating doctor. And their medication, of course, it will be the doses, the timing, and everything. It should be discussed with their physician. Renal patients, the biggest concern with them is dehydration. Hydration is the key for kidney patients, especially who are fasting. However, patients with chronic kidney disease should seek the doctor advice before fasting, and they are actually not advised to. For healthy people who are fasting, they should be aware that the risk of kidney stones, of course, there is a higher risk for formation during Ramadan because of the dehydration that they go through or less water consumption. So those with their body is prone to have forming certain kind of stones, they should be aware, and they should make an eye on their fluid consumption. Certain people with also some neurological problems like multiple sclerosis, fasting is safe for majority of these patients. However, they will need to consider their medication carefully and adjust their doses accordingly. And how to make sure that fasting is actually on a high quality level. I mentioned before that not only focusing on the caloric wise, the pattern of eating is very important. So rather than having all the food all at once after breaking the fast, it is good to have a rest for some time, go for the prayer, and then we'll start with warm fluids. Specifically, it could be a soup, low in calorie, and then give some time for the digestive system to adapt to the process, maybe starting with a salad, high fiber food, and then gradually having the food. Small frequent meals are more advised, and then incorporating fruits and vegetables in the meal is very important, replacing the sweets and desserts that are culturally well known and used to. If someone is taking or consuming or going to consume, it should be advised that a small portion only to be consumed, and try to have it like in the middle of the day. So for example, after the fast, not with the food, the main meal itself, not to overburden the stomach with very high density, simple sugars, calorie food, and high fat content. A lot of times people will turn to simple carbohydrates, specifically in the first meal, as the tendency of being hungry and being low in energy will eager the system to have more of carbohydrates. So that's why it is always good to have some fluids and rest, and then proceed to the main meal. Main concern also the quality of the meal on suhoor, because this is the very important meal that will the body will rely on for the rest of the day. So incorporating all the food groups, including protein, high quality protein, fiber, and healthy fat, it will make sure that the body will preserve the energy for the longer term, for the rest of the day. Having complex carbs instead of simple carbohydrates will fulfill the body and make it feels more full for a longer time, and it will preserve the blood sugar, and it will also prevent somehow muscle wasting, specifically when you are adding protein. A sample meal of that, it could be consuming, for example, oats with a low-fat milk, or yogurt and a boiled egg topped with the oats topped with some fruits and some chia seeds. This will be very good. Otherwise, you can just consume a cup of water on suhoor, along with the chia seed. It has it will add more fiber, will prevent constipation, and it will make you feel full for a longer time. Not to forget the benefits on cholesterol level for the seeds itself. To prevent dehydration, okay, you can, the people can split the intake from iftar to suhoor, like every 1 hour or 2 hours, they can consume up to 3 glasses of water or other low in sugar drinks. And then being hydrated, this also will prevent overeating, or it will actually lower the appetite itself. So here's some of the do's and don'ts that anyone can keep an eye to make sure that they are on the track. Drinking a lot of water, as I mentioned earlier. Highlighting on having a balanced meal on suhoor is very important, and variety is the key. Not to have or repeat the same meal every day. Starting the food with having warm drinks, not very cold or just room temperature, not to shock the digestive system is very important. Focusing on the type of the food and the herbs and the way they are prepared, instead of consuming fried food, spicy food, greasy food. Just keep it simple. It's very important. And don't force the stomach. If it is full, then it is full. No need to finish the whole plate. Just have it after some time. Eating a lot of whole grain cereals like oats, like quinoa, like so many other healthier options than just sticking with bread and rice. It's very important. And having some healthier snack options between the iftar and suhoor, the two main meals, is something wise to do. It could be raw nuts, it could be some olives, some lean proteins like milk, yogurt, eggs, some pulses, and the portion size should be controlled. On the other hand, things that that they should be avoiding, fizzy drinks, high in sugar, as it actually increases the acidity and burden the stomach even more. And if the person is actually ongoing diet, then they can continue on following healthier but not very restricted diet during Ramadan to preserve the muscle mass and make sure that they are nourishing the body. So if they are with a chronic disease, then it is good to have healthier options to take a chance and improve their outcome, their health outcome, and not to eat, as I mentioned, even not to drink and not to eat cold beverages, specifically starting off the meal itself. And not to over drink also. Making sure that the food portion is small, it is not big or overeat, and as much as possible to stay away from processed packaged food, pickles, for example, very high in salt or very high in sugar options. This is very important. Another thing is to have a good quality sleep. There is one of the most common actually things that are majority of the fasting people are doing. They are not eating, they are not sleeping, and they are staying awake from the time of iftar to suhoor, and this is not good. Also, it will not also alter only the digestive system or the weight itself. Also, it may affect or it will have somehow some negative effects on the health itself, blood sugar, metabolism, the thyroid functions, and so many other hormones could be affected. So good quality sleep, 6 hours minimum, it's very good, and it's very advisable for majority of the people. I hope with this talk that I've covered the majority of the things, but I'll be happy to have or answer any questions along with Dr. Syed if you have any concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruba, so much If anybody wants to ask questions, just unmute yourself and you can ask your questions.
There is one question, Lucky, on the chat box.
Yeah.
I will just see. Can you bring up the chat box on screen? Is it possible to share it? It is related to type 2 diabetes and what to do after iftar.
It's by Dr. Rania, right? So the question is, as for diabetic type 2, what is the optimum for them after iftar? Just water or dates or juice?
Look, there are two things. There are two things about diabetic patients, even if it's type 2 diabetes. If the diabetes is reasonably well controlled, if the blood sugars are not very high normally in the month, say in the month before Ramadan, in Shaban, if the blood sugars are well controlled, and it's been like that for a while, then there is no problem with fasting, with fasting in Ramadan, and most people do indeed tend to fast. The second thing is what type of foods to eat when you're diabetic and when you have your when you break your fast. The main concern would be sudden rise in blood sugars after iftar. So if you're avoiding sweets and high calorific and high glycemic index foods, that's fine. So for example, you can take 1 or 2 dates, that's not a problem. You can drink plenty of water. Even if you take fruit juice, if you take fresh fruit juice, that should be fine, but do not add sugar to that, and try to avoid packaged foods or fruit drinks that are very sugary. Freshly prepared fruit juice at home or even eating fruits should be okay, as long as it's done in moderation. There is always a sense of balance that you have to achieve. And if you spread out your food intake, say from Maghrib till an hour later, maybe when you finish your prayers, come back, maybe eat something a little bit later. So spreading it out is useful to do. I think for any individual, this needs to be a one-to-one discussion with your doctor, and it needs to be tailored to how long you've been diabetic, what medicines you take, and what foods you can and cannot take. This has to be a more specific discussion, should be with your doctor.
Okay, Doctor, she continued. Dr. Rania continued asking, kids below 10, 8 years old, is it safe for them to fast, especially during school?
I do know that a lot of kids fast, although kids of that age are not expected to fast, but it depends on what time of the year and what climate you're living in. In a hot summer months in the Gulf countries, it becomes very difficult for kids, especially when they're going to school. They are running around, they're playing in the sun, they're kids being kids in school. So as long as we can take care that they don't have any health conditions and they're healthy, I think 10 and above I would not worry, but anybody younger than that, I think you need to think very carefully about whether kids should fast. Maybe it's a good idea for them to fast on the weekends when they are at home, just to get used to the idea. But yes, this is a question. I cannot give you a black and white answer. It has to be decided by each parent. But in general, the younger the kid, the more the risks, especially in hot summer months. I hope Dr. Karim is also with us. I mean, I'm quite happy to hear his views on what he has to say. He's a senior gastroenterologist in Mecca.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for the lovely lecture. I'm actually delighted and pleased that you actually raised this topic and you took it forward at presenting level for both the speakers. You gave a very good overview of Ramadan and how its effects on health. Actually, I think we need to discuss more of this from my perspective. When it comes to evidence that we need to provide, there is very, very limited evidence, particularly focusing on Ramadan. There's huge amount of research based mainly on intermittent fasting. So I think this actually raises the discussion that we need to do more research on people who are fasting and see the benefits. They are huge benefits, no doubt, which you already listed. And I think people should have more talks like this. And I think it would be better to have these talks before you start Ramadan. Maybe that would give people an opportunity to prepare for Ramadan. And I look forward for more talks like this from other places. And I think you have stimulated this discussion. Like I said, we need to do more research, specifically looking at Ramadan fasting.
Can you put your camera on, please, Kareem?
You want me to?
If possible, yes.
Yeah. There you go. Let me just. Yeah.
Any other questions, Lucky?
Yes, the stage is open. Anybody can unmute and ask their questions. Yeah, you can even ask in Arabic as well. Miss Ruba can answer.
Ruba, I wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, Ruba. Consumption of meat. When we have guests at home or when we go to somebody's house, I have a feeling that we tend to eat too much meat in Ramadan, not more than we eat otherwise. What do you have to say about that? I know it's not a good idea, but just for our delegates, please.
Actually, this is very common that I face a lot in the clinic, and I see a lot of patients suffering from the outcome of having or overeating any specific type of food. What I usually advise them, if possible, when we are at home, we have that chance to give some time for the body and then to have or consume our main meal. But instead, what you can do, you can be wise and try to balance somehow your plate. I know sometimes it's difficult. You are enjoying the portion or you are enjoying the meal itself, but things that are affecting the body and the digestive system, the way the food is cooked, basically. So if we have with that meal something that will improve the digestion problem, like for example, if we are consuming meat, then it is high protein and high fat meal. We can just before that we can skip the soup because it will fulfill the body and the stomach can be over like it will have so many problems or outcomes on the stomach. And then you can have salad instead of cooked vegetables, salad, very high fiber on next to this meal. We can skip other high fat content meal, like if there is laban, for example, or any other source of protein. If we are focusing on the meat, this will somehow help overcome the symptoms that majority of the people will have. And having the fluids before or after the meal, not at the same time with the meal itself. This somehow can help with solving the problem, let's say.
Thank you.
Dr. Naveed and Ms. Ruba, thank you very much for a lovely presentation, although I don't fast because you know that very well. But I just have a basic question. How different is intermittent fasting from the Ramadan fasting? I mean, I understand by the word intermittent, but is there a basic difference in it?
I'll try and answer that to the best of my understanding. Okay, so when we fast, we are depriving our body of nutrition for a fixed period of time. Okay, so when you fast for health reasons alone, like intermittent fasting, say 16 hours fasting, 18 hours fasting, or fasting for 3 full days in a week, say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example, then the basic difference is people stop eating food, but they keep themselves hydrated. They drink water. Okay. That's one thing, one big difference. The second difference is the psychology is a little different. I think our bodies are not just physical entities, but there's a thought process. There is a psychology constantly with us. As long as we live, we are thinking beings. So when you're fasting to lose weight, or for health benefits alone, then you're depriving yourself of food. And what happens after that period determines how much benefit you get. Do you overcompensate? Do you binge eat after that, or why you're doing it? Whereas in Ramadan, there is a very huge amount of spiritual aspect to fasting, and it is done for a continuous month.
Right.
So the difficulty we see is that in the evening, people don't pay too much attention to what we eat and what we don't eat. But if you can take care of that, then the month-long fasting will potentially have a huge health benefit. The downside, of course, is the lack of fluids. That is a bit of a challenge in this situation that needs to be met. And as Dr. Karim said, there's not been a lot of study or research on what happens to the body physiology or what happens in illness when you're fasting. I think there is a huge opportunity to do some research now that there is so many of us interested in this to understand better. But with what we know so far, I can see these two fundamental differences in intermittent fasting and Ramadan fasting.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you. That's it for me.
So any more questions?
Lucky, you can share perhaps an email address or a WhatsApp number with the audience or on the website that they can ask any questions if they have related to this topic. Because we are it's nearly 1 o'clock and I have to get back to my OPD as well.
No problem, doctor. So I will be sharing this video in our social media with the contact details. Anybody can ask their questions.
Sure, and then once you get the questions, you can forward it to me or
Ruba,
and we can answer it as best as possible.
All right. Anyways, thank you, doctor. Thank you, Ms. Ruba, for a wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Ruba. Thank you, Dr. Syed. Thank you.
Ramadan Karim to everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to Dr. Karim. A special thanks to Dr. Karim Sharif from Mecca.
Thank you, Dr. Karim.
Thank you, Dr. Karim.
Thank you very much.